Thank you very much, Stephen. Well, African Rainbow Capital Investments has reported some upbeat growth during the year ended June 30. ARC's net asset value per share expanded by just over 14% and was boosted by units such as investments in Rain, TymeBank in South Africa, Tyme Global in Singapore, and Alexforbes, including Fledge Capital and Capital Legacy. During the year under review, Patrice Motsepe's ARC increased the value of its total portfolio, excluding cash, by 11% to 13.6 billion rands. To talk more about these and other developments, we are joined by ARC's co-CEO, Johan van der Merwe. Mr. van der Merwe, thank you very much for your time. Let's talk about the highlights for what has been a difficult period for many companies. It's been an interesting year full of fuel price hikes, runaway inflation, the war in Ukraine, amongst others. What have been the highlights for you when you look at yourselves as an organization and your customers as well?
Thank you, Kolani. Very nice to join you tonight. I think the highlights really were some of our larger investments like Rain and TymeBank that really came through this year. I think in terms of Rain, fortunately that was one of the investments that did quite well during the COVID period as well and the pandemic, because people worked more from home, but it became a household name now in terms of data. And we were also, a recipient of the other auction in terms of the more data out there, and we were quite beneficial in terms of getting the data that we wanted in terms of that auction as well, in terms of the spectrum. That business is doing very well, picking up customers all the time, and I think it is a business that will do well going into future as well. TymeBank as well, we hit the 5 million customers within 3 years now. Very important to roll out new products now and new services to the customers, and that we're doing as well. And we also had very important and I think successful capital raises on that side as well, with Tencent, which is part of the Naspers group, coming in as a shareholder there, and also the CDC, which is the Commonwealth Development Corporation of the UK, seeing huge upside in a business like that and coming in as shareholders for us in TymeBank as well.
Starting a new bank is no small feat because when you look at the results today, ARC has invested additional funds into 3 of your largest investments, and that being Rain, 56 million rands, and 362 million rands in crops, and TymeBank and Tyme Global. You invested over 300 million rands. This is something that has to do with startup costs and cumulative operating losses. When you look at other banks, there has been Discovery Bank, there's a new other digital bank. The costs are massive. Are they in line with what you were expecting?
That is definitely in line with what we were expecting. I mean, as you mentioned, it's no small feat to start a bank, and the other banks don't just sit back and let you steal their customers. It's a very competitive environment in South Africa, and it's good like that as well. We play in a very specific niche, which is the digital banking side. But I think we were very fortunate in having started this bank. They approached Dr. Patrice Motsepe, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. They eventually decided to focus only on Australia and New Zealand. And after having spent quite a bit of money in South Africa, we actually picked that up for quite a bit less, at about 10 to 15% of the money that they spent here already at that point in time. But since then, we've invested much more money into the business. Many of us, a lot of those funds came from African Rainbow Capital itself, but we were very fortunate, as I mentioned earlier, to get very, very good international investors as well, in the likes of Tencent, and also the Commonwealth Development Corporation. And we get approached on numerous occasions by international people to invest with us in this bank as well. And because TymeBank is obviously in South Africa, we also have Tyme Global in Singapore, and we're rolling out a bank in the Philippines at this point in time, and we've also secured a license in Pakistan. So from that point of view, I think it's looking very good for TymeBank and Tyme Global.
The competition in the digital banking space clearly shows that there is a huge appetite for that sort of service when it comes to low-cost banking. Even with the latest introduction of the Be Mobile Africa, another digital bank, how is TymeBank planning to stay ahead of the curve and still be attractive when it comes to attracting customers in that space?
Very good question, Koradi. So I think the one thing that I've liked about TymeBank since day one, there were lots of opportunities to have bolt-ons and to do different things, etc. And every time we take it to TymeBank, which obviously have got their own management team and board, and we're only an investor, they said, listen, we want to focus on what we need to do. And now it's the first time that they've amassed 5 million plus customers. That is really rolling out quite nicely on a monthly basis. I think we're adding anything between 100 and 120,000 customers as well, and that's rolling out quite nicely. So it's the first time that they start looking at what are the different types of new products that we can bring in, and it's really about the customer at the end of the day. One has to understand the customer. One has to understand the segment that you're playing in and what they want, and give them that. And obviously, from a digital bank, it's everywhere. It's where you are all the time. That's what Tyme stands for. It says take your money everywhere. I think if we can get that right, we will be good. That doesn't mean other digital banks will not be successful as well, but we just want to make sure that we're one of the successful ones.
Let's talk about something else outside of these results. Interest rates coming out from the Reserve Bank Monetary Policy Committee next Thursday. What are your expectations there? Because judging by what most people are saying, they're expecting anything between 50 basis points and 75 basis points. And when it comes to inflation expectations from your side, would you say that we have reached a peak and we might see that number, the consumer price index, actually softening in the coming months?
Kolani, I think we're in for a tough time with that. South Africa, we've got our own economy, but we're not an island in the world. And if one looks at what's happening worldwide now with inflation pressures in the UK, in Europe, and in the US, with interest rate hikes there as well, I think we're not going to be spared that. I think we're going to see hikes here. I think we're going to see inflation. I know that the Monetary Policy Committee, they're very focused on containing inflation, because in the long run, inflation is a really ugly dragon, which you don't want. But I think the world has become much better at handling these type of situations. If you go back 40, 50 years, and we had the problems that we have now in the world with electricity prices, gas prices, and the war in Ukraine, etc. You could actually make yourself ready for 10 years, of hard labor, etc. Now there are many measures, whether it's austerity measures or incentives that they put in place. I think the world is just better to handle that. So I think we are in for a tough time. I think we will see inflation creeping up a little bit more. I think we will see interest rate increases as well, but I don't see it a very long cycle. I think the cycles become much shorter because, as I said, the world is better at handling these.
Let's talk about your expectations on returns looking ahead into the outlook now in the next year. There is a lot of market volatility now, and the market and investors are wondering how the returns will actually perform in the next year. What is going to be important for the group going ahead in terms of those returns?
I think in general, for us as a group, one has to start looking at our larger investments, which is the Rain, TymeBank, Alexforbes, and also the mine that we have on the west coast, Crops Elandsfontein. I think if we can get those into positive cash generation territory, I think we're going to see very, very good returns from ARC investments. I think there are smaller ones that are really looking very good at this point in time. Maybe people think that they will not add that much value because those are smaller investments. But, some of these smaller investments where we invested anything between 50 and 100 million rand, we believe that they can be a 10 or a 20 bagger, meaning that they can become a billion rand business eventually because of, it's either a platform business which can leverage, quite significantly off that, etc. So because our larger investments, which were really cash draining in the last few years and coming to a point where we either reach break even and going into positive territory, we believe that the returns will be very good in African Rainbow Capital for the next year.
Johan van der Merwe is the co-CEO at African Rainbow Capital. Thank you very much, sir, for your time.